Here's an inspiring and engaging intro for your speech. Dopamine addiction is the new silent pandemic designed to hook viewers and keep them watching until the end. Have you ever felt restless, constantly seeking stimulation, scrolling endlessly on your phone, watching videos, checking notifications, and still feeling unsatisfied? You're not imagining it. There's a reason your brain feels like it's always chasing something it can't quite catch. What if I told you that this isn't just a habit or lack of willpower, but a silent pandemic that's rewiring the very circuits in your brain responsible for focus, motivation, and joy? In our modern world, the chemical that drives every action, every desire, and every burst of motivation, dopamine, is being hijacked. What was once a survival mechanism, helping our ancestors find food, form social bonds, and achieve meaningful goals, is now constantly overstimulated by social media, instant notifications, endless streaming content, and digital distractions. The result is a brain that craves constant novelty, a nervous system that never fully rests, and a mind that struggles to find satisfaction in anything that requires effort. In the next 15-18 minutes, you're going to discover exactly how dopamine addiction works, why it affects your mood, focus, and motivation, and most importantly, what science-backed strategies you can use to reclaim control over your brain's reward system. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your attention feels scattered, why you're always chasing the next hit of pleasure, and how you can retrain your nervous system to find deep, lasting fulfillment in life rather than fleeting microstimuli. This isn't just about understanding your brain, it's about taking action to restore your energy, focus, and emotional balance. If you stay with me till the end, you'll gain the tools to break free from the invisible chains of dopamine addiction and reclaim your motivation, your joy, and your mental clarity. If you want, I can now write the full 18-minute motivational speech with all 6 keynotes explained, real-life examples, audience retention hooks, and a powerful conclusion, ready for your Neuropulse YouTube channel, optimized to keep viewers engaged and drive watch time. The brain's natural craving for novelty and instant gratification is a central reason why dopamine addiction has become a silent pandemic in modern life. From an evolutionary perspective, our neural circuits evolved to seek new opportunities, resources, and social connections, which increase the chances of survival and reproduction. Dopamine acts as the signal that motivates exploration and reward-seeking behavior. When we encounter something novel or potentially beneficial, dopamine is released, reinforcing behaviors that led to that positive outcome. This system worked effectively in environments where rewards were scarce and required effort, ensuring that humans remained motivated to pursue meaningful, goal-directed actions. In today's world, however, the availability of instant rewards has exploded and our brain's craving for novelty is constantly exploited. Social media feeds, endless video content, and instant messaging deliver small bursts of dopamine in a highly predictable, continuous manner, creating a feedback loop that the brain was never designed to handle. The effect of this constant, easy access to rewards is that the brain begins to favor immediate gratification over delayed rewards, undermining long-term goal pursuit and persistence. Tasks that once felt motivating because they led to meaningful outcomes now seem less appealing compared to instant digital stimulation. The anticipation of novelty becomes addictive, and the neural circuits associated with reward learning are rewired to prioritize short-term pleasure over effortful achievements. As a result, long-term planning, delayed gratification, and the ability to work toward challenging goals suffer because the brain has adapted to expect frequent, effortless reward surges. Even when someone is aware of the benefits of long-term action, the dopamine-driven craving for immediate stimulation can override rational decision-making, making it harder to focus, sustain motivation, or enjoy deeper forms of accomplishment. This craving for novelty also contributes to mental fatigue. The constant search for new stimulation keeps the nervous system partially activated even during periods of rest. Attention is continually fragmented as the brain unconsciously scans for opportunities for reward, whether it's checking notifications, seeking new content, or anticipating social validation. This repeated engagement of reward circuits consumes energy and diminishes the brain's capacity to maintain focus on meaningful tasks. Over time, the repeated preference for instant gratification can also desensitize dopamine pathways, requiring increasingly frequent or intense stimulation to achieve the same sense of pleasure. Understanding the brain's evolutionary wiring helps explain why we are drawn to constant novelty and immediate rewards, and why this makes modern life so mentally exhausting. By intentionally reducing exposure to high-frequency stimuli, practicing delayed gratification, and engaging in activities that provide effortful but meaningful reward, we can retrain the brain's craving for instant dopamine surges, restore focus, and regain the ability to find satisfaction in long-term goals and deeper achievements. The brain's natural craving for novelty and instant gratification is a fundamental reason why dopamine addiction has become so widespread in modern life. Evolutionarily, humans develop neural circuits that respond strongly to new opportunities, potential rewards, and social signals because these traits improve survival and reproduction. When the brain encounters something new, dopamine is released, creating a sense of anticipation and reinforcing behaviors that led to that reward. In ancestral environments, rewards were scarce and required effort, finding food, forming alliances, or overcoming challenges, and dopamine release helped motivate sustained, purposeful behavior. Modern life, however, constantly floods the brain with instant, effortless sources of novelty. Social media feeds, streaming platforms, notifications, messages, and online content provide rapid, predictable dopamine surges that continually stimulate the brain's reward system without any significant effort, creating a feedback loop that drives compulsive behavior. This constant availability of novel stimulation has profound effects on motivation and satisfaction. The brain begins to favor immediate rewards over delayed ones, making long-term goals feel less appealing in comparison to the instant gratification offered by digital and environmental microstimuli. Tasks that require patience, focus, or effort, such as learning a skill, completing a project, or maintaining meaningful relationships, can feel unrewarding or even tedious because the brain has adapted to expect rapid reward surges. This shift in reward preference reduces the ability to enjoy effortful accomplishments and undermines persistence. Even when someone consciously values long-term goals, the dopamine-driven craving for novelty can override rational decision-making, leading to distraction, procrastination, or compulsive checking of devices and notifications. The craving for constant novelty also contributes to mental fatigue and reduced focus. The nervous system remains partially activated as the brain continuously anticipates potential rewards, scanning for opportunities for stimulation even during periods of rest or inactivity. This persistent low-level activation depletes cognitive energy, making it harder to sustain attention, regulate emotions, and maintain motivation. Over time, the repeated pursuit of instant gratification desensitizes dopamine pathways, requiring increasingly frequent or intense stimuli to achieve the same pleasurable response. This desensitization intensifies the cycle of craving, distraction, and fatigue, creating a subtle but persistent form of mental exhaustion. Recognizing the brain's evolutionary wiring helps explain why humans are drawn to novelty and instant rewards, and why modern life amplifies this tendency to the point of dysfunction. By intentionally limiting exposure to high-frequency stimuli, cultivating delayed gratification, and engaging in meaningful, effortful activities, it is possible to retrain the brain's reward circuits. This allows for restored focus, improved motivation, and the ability to experience deeper satisfaction from long-term achievements rather than constant microstimuli. The overstimulation of reward circuits through modern digital platforms has a profound impact on attention, focus, and cognitive performance, making dopamine addiction not only a behavioral issue but also a neurological one. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for executive functions such as planning, decision-making, self-control, and sustained attention, is highly sensitive to dopamine signaling. When dopamine pathways are constantly activated by instant rewards, likes on social media, notifications, or short bursts of entertainment, the prefrontal cortex becomes overburdened and less efficient at regulating impulses and directing attention toward meaningful tasks. This creates a paradox in which the brain appears alert and stimulated, yet struggles to focus on deep, effortful work. Even when someone is sitting still or engaging in routine activities, their attention is fragmented because the brain is unconsciously seeking the next dopamine surge. Overstimulation also diminishes the brain's capacity for sustained focus. The natural reward system is designed for short-term bursts of motivation tied to meaningful effort, but constant micro-rewards from digital platforms train the brain to expect frequent, immediate gratification. This rewiring reduces patience for long-term goals and makes tasks that require deep cognitive engagement feel laborious or uninteresting. Working memory, which allows the brain to hold and manipulate information, becomes taxed by the repeated switching between tasks or the anticipation of digital rewards. Even passive consumption of content, such as scrolling through feeds, involves continuous evaluation, prediction, and emotional response, which consumes cognitive resources. The neural consequence of this overstimulation is a form of mental fatigue that occurs without physical exertion. The brain is effectively running even while the body is at rest, keeping the nervous system in a low-level state of alertness. Over time, this constant engagement of attentional and reward circuits can impair executive function, reduce problem-solving ability, and create a chronic sense of cognitive exhaustion. Emotional regulation is also affected because the prefrontal cortex is less able to modulate responses from the amygdala, leaving individuals more prone to irritability, frustration, and impulsive behavior. Recognizing how dopamine overstimulation hijacks attention is essential for regaining mental clarity and focus. By deliberately controlling exposure to instant digital rewards, practicing single tasking, and scheduling periods of undistracted work or rest, the nervous system can begin to recalibrate. Activities that provide meaningful, effort-based reward, learning a new skill, engaging in physical exercise, or completing challenging projects help restore prefrontal cortex function and balance dopamine signaling. Over time, these practices improve attention, cognitive performance, and the ability to find satisfaction in long-term achievements rather than fleeting digital microstimuli. Chronic overstimulation of dopamine pathways has a profound effect on mood and emotional balance, which is one of the most insidious consequences of modern dopamine addiction. Dopamine is not just a pleasure chemical, it plays a central role in regulating motivation, reward anticipation, and emotional responses. When the brain is repeatedly exposed to high-frequency, low-effort rewards, such as social media notifications, streaming content, or instant messaging, dopamine circuits are continuously activated, creating a state of heightened arousal and expectation. Over time, this repeated stimulation can dysregulate the brain's natural reward system, making it difficult to experience satisfaction from everyday activities that once brought joy, such as social interactions, hobbies, or completing meaningful tasks. The nervous system becomes conditioned to expect rapid and predictable dopamine surges, and when these surges are absent, individuals may feel bored, restless, or irritable, even during periods of rest or inactivity. This dysregulation also affects emotional stability. The prefrontal cortex, which governs self-control, emotional regulation, and decision-making, must work harder to counterbalance the hyperactivation of reward circuits. When the prefrontal cortex is taxed in this way, it becomes less efficient at modulating impulses and controlling emotional responses, leaving individuals more vulnerable to mood swings, anxiety, and irritability. Even minor stressors can feel overwhelming because the brain is constantly primed for instant reward and novelty. Over time, the imbalance between hyperactive reward circuits and executive function results in a subtle but chronic form of emotional fatigue. Another consequence is the blunting of natural pleasure. As the brain adapts to frequent high-intensity stimulation, baseline dopamine sensitivity decreases, which reduces the ability to feel joy from normal, low-intensity activities. Tasks that require effort, delayed gratification, or consistent engagement begin to feel unappealing, further reinforcing reliance on instant, high-reward stimuli. This creates a feedback loop where the individual becomes increasingly dependent on artificial dopamine surges to feel engaged or satisfied, further perpetuating emotional instability and mental exhaustion. Understanding how chronic dopamine overstimulation undermines mood and emotional regulation is crucial for reclaiming mental balance. Intentional strategies, such as limiting exposure to high-frequency digital stimuli, practicing mindfulness, engaging in physical activity, and deliberately scheduling rewarding, effortful experiences, help recalibrate the brain's reward circuits. Over time, these practices restore emotional stability, increase resilience, and allow the nervous system to experience natural satisfaction and motivation, reducing anxiety, irritability, and the sense of mental exhaustion that accompanies dopamine addiction. Continuous overstimulation of dopamine pathways can lead to tolerance and desensitization, creating a silent epidemic of dependency that often goes unnoticed. Dopamine's role in the brain is to signal reward and reinforce behaviors that promote survival and goal achievement, but the modern environment has created an abundance of artificially intense rewards. Every notification, social media like, video clip, or instant message produces a small surge of dopamine, and when these surges occur repeatedly, the brain's reward circuits adapt to the heightened level of stimulation. This adaptation reduces the responsiveness of dopamine receptors, meaning that over time, the same activity produces less pleasure. As a result, individuals require increasingly frequent, intense, or novel stimulation to achieve the same sense of satisfaction, which is the hallmark of tolerance. This process mirrors the mechanisms seen in traditional substance addiction, but it operates quietly and invisibly because it is embedded in everyday behaviors that society views as normal or harmless. Desensitization of dopamine pathways also diminishes motivation for activities that were previously rewarding but require effort. Tasks like learning a new skill, completing a project, exercising, or even engaging in meaningful social interactions feel less stimulating because they no longer trigger the intense dopamine response the brain has come to expect. Instead, attention and energy are drawn toward activities that provide rapid, predictable reward, reinforcing compulsive patterns of behavior. This cycle contributes to a pervasive sense of mental exhaustion, even during periods of inactivity, because the nervous system is constantly seeking stimulation to compensate for the reduced sensitivity of reward circuits. The long-term consequences of dopamine desensitization extend beyond motivation and attention. Emotional regulation is impaired because the prefrontal cortex must work harder to manage impulses and regulate responses from overstimulated limbic circuits. Anxiety, irritability, and low mood become more common, even in the absence of overt stressors, as the brain struggles to achieve equilibrium. The individual may find themselves trapped in a loop of seeking instant gratification while experiencing diminished pleasure from everyday life, creating a subtle but chronic form of mental fatigue that can be difficult to recognize or address. Recognizing the presence of tolerance and desensitization is essential for recovery. Intentional strategies such as scheduled digital detoxes, deliberate engagement in effortful and meaningful activities, physical exercise, mindfulness, and reward pacing can help restore sensitivity to natural dopamine signals. By gradually recalibrating the brain's reward circuits, it is possible to regain motivation, focus, and emotional balance, reducing dependency on instant, artificial rewards and reclaiming a sense of satisfaction and energy that modern overstimulation has quietly eroded. Rewiring dopamine circuits requires intentional habits and boundaries because the brain's reward system, once hijacked by modern overstimulation, does not naturally recalibrate on its own. Dopamine pathways evolve to reinforce survival behaviors like seeking food, forming social connections, and learning from experience, where rewards were effort-based and spaced over time. Modern life, however, provides near-constant low-effort stimuli, social media notifications, streaming content, instant messages, and online interactions that produce frequent dopamine surges. Over time, the brain adapts to this high-frequency stimulation by reducing receptor sensitivity, which diminishes pleasure from natural rewards and creates compulsive craving for novelty. Without deliberate intervention, these patterns become entrenched, leaving attention fragmented, focus diminished, and motivation toward meaningful tasks depleted. The nervous system remains in a state of low-level alertness, continuously seeking stimulation even when the body is at rest, resulting in chronic mental fatigue and emotional imbalance. Restoring balance requires establishing boundaries around digital consumption and environmental stimuli, limiting notifications, scheduling specific periods for social media or entertainment, and avoiding constant multitasking reduces the frequency of artificial dopamine surges. This allows the brain to recalibrate, gradually restoring sensitivity to natural effort-based rewards. Engaging in activities that involve skill building, creative output, or physical exertion provides purposeful, meaningful reward that contrasts with the instant gratification of digital stimuli. These activities release dopamine in a controlled, delayed manner, reinforcing the brain's ability to anticipate and enjoy rewards without overstimulation. Over time, the nervous system learns to differentiate between high-value, effortful rewards and low-effort, repetitive microstimuli, improving attention, motivation, and satisfaction. Mindfulness and deliberate awareness play a critical role in this process. By observing impulses, cravings, and habitual responses to stimuli without immediately acting on them, individuals strengthen prefrontal cortex regulation over reward circuits. Meditation, journaling, or conscious reflection on goals can enhance self-control, reduce compulsive behavior, and promote emotional regulation. The combination of structured environmental boundaries and mindful engagement with effortful reward experiences allows the nervous system to reset, reducing the constant activation that underlies mental exhaustion. Over time, these intentional strategies enable the brain to operate closer to its natural design. Dopamine circuits regain responsiveness, making delayed gratification and meaningful achievement feel genuinely satisfying. Motivation, focus, and emotional balance improve, and the brain no longer relies on artificial high-frequency stimuli for stimulation. By committing to conscious habits and creating protective boundaries, it is possible to reclaim control over the nervous system, restore energy, and experience deep, sustainable reward in both daily life and long-term goals. Here's a powerful and inspiring conclusion for your speech. Dopamine addiction is the new silent pandemic, along with a motivating good luck and thank you message. Now that you understand how modern life hijacks your brain's dopamine system, it's clear that this silent pandemic isn't a reflection of weakness or lack of willpower. It's a result of environmental and digital overstimulation rewiring your reward circuits. Your brain was designed to seek effortful, meaningful rewards, to focus, plan, and experience satisfaction from delayed gratification. Today, constant notifications, instant content, and easy pleasures have recalibrated those circuits, leaving you restless, distracted, and mentally exhausted. The good news is that your brain is adaptable. With intention, discipline, and consistent effort, you can recalibrate your dopamine pathways, regain focus, restore motivation, and find genuine pleasure in meaningful achievements rather than fleeting microstimuli. The journey requires conscious choices, limiting unnecessary digital exposure, creating deliberate boundaries, engaging in effortful and purposeful activities, practicing mindfulness, and respecting your nervous system's need for rest and recovery. Each small step compounds over time, restoring your capacity for deep focus, emotional balance, and sustainable energy. Remember, the same chemical that has made modern life so addictive is also the key to reclaiming your motivation and joy when harnessed thoughtfully. Good luck on this journey to reclaim your mental clarity, focus, and true satisfaction. Trust yourself, take small, consistent actions, and know that your brain can adapt and thrive even in the midst of constant distraction. Thank you for investing this time in understanding your mind, your habits, and your potential. By taking these steps, you're not just surviving the modern world, you're learning to thrive in it, reclaiming your energy, and creating a life that feels truly rewarding,